I'm Katie Haynes, or as some of you might know me, the Doctor. You can find me at KatieGangel44 on TikTok, and you have been listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting. Speaking of which, I got this one, and I got all of these. I really should have a display for these.
Larry, it's Fraser, and you use They All Say Who is Doctor Who? Where is he from?
What does he do? They wonder who is Doctor Who? So I ask you, who's Doctor Who?
Welcome back to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, the podcast that explores the crazy world of Doctor Who collecting and all kinds of Doctor Who merchandise. And sometimes just Doctor Who. Brought to you in part by Forbidden Planet and Bags Unlimited Incorporated. We are thankful to be on the air once again in 2025. I am Larry Van Mersbergen, your host, and I have been a collector now of Doctor Who since 1981. So it's a long time, and a long time to learn some things, and I always learn new things. So welcome to our 84th episode, celebrating Doctor Who collecting and much, much more. In case this is your first time, you can always skip past this part, but I opened one of the first Doctor Who stores in Chicago that exclusively served Doctor Who fans. It was back in 1984, and I called that little company Bundles from Britain. And interesting enough, we fast forward to about 2017, and I get a hold of a great little book called Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America. In fact, I had the author, Stephen Warren Hill, on the show, and I found my company in the index, and it just kind of, it hit me kind of like, well, actually somebody remembers this? This is something else in a history book. So I made history. Well, at least in that book I did. But it's very humbling. But anyway, we live on page 384, and we're very proud to be a part of that wonderful book. You can find a link to buy that book at the front page of our website at DoctorWhoCollectors.com. I just want all collectors to have a copy. Enjoy it. We are part of the Direction Point Doctor Who network. Again, in this year, we're hoping to add more great Doctor Who podcasts to our network. So if you are a host of a Doctor Who podcast and you listen to this one, please join the Direction Point network. There is no cost to join. It's very easy. All you have to do is make a 30 to 40 second bumper for each of our podcasts. It doesn't take very long. I do it all the time. And that way you reach other listeners. It's a wonderful thing. So there you go. And of course, we share this network with some wonderful people, including Time Streams, which is up and running, Police Box in a Junkyard, the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, Traveling the Vortex, Doctor Who Literature, Time Ram, and many more. For more information, go to directionpoint.org. And speaking of links, I include this in every episode in case this is your first one. Take a look at timelash.com, and under that heading, select the TARDIS library. It is one of the most thoroughly kept up databases of Doctor Who merchandise in print, media, and basically books, audio, video, but no magazines, no figurines, that kind of thing. But you can also set up a free account and keep track of your stuff that you own, or the stuff you want to buy, or your want list, and even provides convenient links to eBay and Amazon. So you definitely have to check that out. And a big thanks to my good friend Dan O'Malley, who keeps that site free. If you need to do a deep dive, if you want to do like a deep dive into Doctor Who merchandise, you want to find the Dalek cufflinks or something like that, then you need to find Howe's Transcendental Toy Box at drwhotoybox.co.uk. My good friend David J. Howe, of course, is behind that, and I just spoke to him the other day. What a great guy. A good friend, too. Just a wonderful guy. Good resource, too. So if you need to have a question answered, I can usually direct it to him, and he can usually find the answer. Now, if you're shopping and you want to look for some great Doctor Who items at great prices, now look no further than DoctorWhoStore.com. That's Alien Entertainment. They have what you need and are currently always running specials on certain things. If you happen to live in the Chicago or west suburbs, you can select free pickup from the store and save on that shipping cost. So for store hours, of course, they're in a wonderful location in Lombard and in Logan Square. AlienEntertainment.com for that information. You can also find some great stuff at Forbidden Planet, but you don't need to go to Forbidden Planet to do that. You can stay right here from the liberty of your couch, I guess, and visit DoctorWhoCollectors.com. I think I got that right. Anyway, our own eBay store is there, and our merchandise links. You can do that. Just visit our website. DoctorWhoCollectors.com. And I'm sorry if I messed up there. I went off script, and you should never go off script. And don't forget our own eBay store. We've got lots of books for sale, including some hardcovers and some Radio Times issues and some fun things there. And that's what helps keep us on the virtual air. You can also find some great Doctor Who items at our good friends at Who North America. Keith and Jenny, wonderful people. They've been great to me for the last couple of years. And they opened, they've been open for quite some time. In fact, I was in a documentary about them not long ago. So that's whona.com. And of course, don't forget our wonderful friends at the Who Shop in London. And a big hello out there to Alex and the whole staff. And thank you for listening. You can find them at thewhoshop.com. In addition to all of our podcasts posted on our website, we have the complete guide, one of the most complete guides to Doctor Who classic hardcover books. These are the books from Tandem Publications, Wingate, W.H. Allen, Longbow, that kind of thing. We list reprints that we've discovered and information that we've discovered from the field and from collectors all across the world who've contributed to our database there. We also have been a contributor to Paul McSmith's book based on a TV series, I think it's called. Anyway, if that's about it. But what's going on? What is going on? Well, I am pleased to announce that Doctoberfest is set for Saturday, October 18th at the Who North America location in Canby. That is all, except that I will be there. But that's it. I'm the first guest, and we'll see what goes from there. Still being planned, and I will keep you posted. Target books. We buy a lot of job lots of Target books. We're talking if you've got 20 or 200, we have a fixed price. If the books are in decent condition, either they're not beat up or they're not library copies or with stickers or whatnot, we try to pay an average of about $2.75 per book. And we will pay to ship it as well. We'll help you out there. Just if you want to get rid of them, you can sell them to me and save the hassle of going to eBay. So that's really, really a helpful thing. Just email me at drwhocollectorspodcast@gmail.com with your list, condition, and maybe some photos, and I will get you back an offer. On today's show, we will continue our coverage of those classic hardcovers in the year 1986 with my special guest, Tony Whitt of the Doctor Who Target Book Club. I usually go through the book and its background, who did the cover, any special stories about it, its value. And Tony, from the help of his podcast, the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, will give you the review of the actual novel itself. So is it a good read? Exactly. So it's a wonderful, wonderful time whenever Tony gets on the program. It's a popular show. I also want to thank our patrons. If you do want to see exclusive video material, you can go to our Patreon site at patreon.com/Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. You can also support us at our web host. That's at Podbean. We're a Podbean podcast, DoctorWhoCollectors.podbean.com. Our theme song is Who's Doctor Who, composed by Barry Mason and Les Reed, performed by my good friend Fraser Hines, who, by the way, usually comes with every convention ticket. So keep an eye on that so you can meet Frasier just about anywhere. And if you caught my last episode, I had a chance to interview Frasier Hines along with the great Wendy Padbury on the main stage at Chicago TARDIS, and that was a lot of fun. And I do apologize. Some folks had said that the audio was hard, but that's how it goes, though. Sometimes when you're recording live, you don't always get the best take, but I was able to understand it pretty well. So there you go. You can take this podcast with you anywhere you go, including Apple Podcasts, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and Podbean. And in most anywhere you get your podcasts, Spotify included. We are, of course, a Direction Point Network podcast. So after this short break, we'll go to My Time, do our main story about those hardcovers, and a most outrageous offer of a most outrageous nature, I should say. So until then, stay tuned.
Traveling the Vortex.
Are you ready to embark on an epic journey through time and space? Join the thousands of Whovians around the world who've discovered Traveling the Vortex, the ultimate Doctor Who podcast for die-hard fans and curious newcomers alike.
Every week, we dive deep into the Whoniverse, discussing the episodes, theories, and hidden gems. We dissect the Doctor's adventures, share behind-the-scenes stories, and explore the legacy of this iconic show.
Traveling the Vortex brings fans together, fostering a global community of Whovians. Whether you're a fan of classic or new Who, there's something for everyone.
Join us on this incredible journey as we unravel the mysteries of time and space.
Don't miss out. Subscribe to Traveling the Vortex today on your favorite podcast platform.
Traveling the Vortex. Your ticket to adventure awaits.
Traveling the Vortex is a proud member of the Direction Point Podcast Network. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Hi, I'm Juliet.
And I'm Nathan.
Experience Doctor Who from the very beginning through a classic fan's eyes.
And through the eyes of a new Who fan.
Reminisce and relive those classic moments with Nathan as he offers fun insight.
Or experience them for the first time with Juliet as she dwells on social issues, history, fashion, and the size of a flashlight.
We're the Time Streams podcast.
Find us on Spotify, Stitcher, or Apple Podcasts. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
It's my time. And now it's time for my time. I hope everyone's had a great new year and everything behind us from 2024. It's great to be back in 2025. So what's on the horizon for us here at the podcast? Well, anyway, a lot has happened. So including some of my collection photos were released on a Blu-ray release, the one with Sylvester McCoy. And it was really exciting to see that and on there and be thanked in the credits. It was really cool. I'm also working on a documentary with Keith Bardfather on the Who USA tour. And I'll also be part of a PBS documentary on Doctor Who fandom. And that's being put together by Russell McGee. So wonderful, wonderful things happening there. I also announced earlier, but a little more detail, Doctoberfest 2025 has been announced for October 18th down at the Who North America in Canby. So we're excited to be there. I will not be at Consinity this year. They rotate their guests every so often, which is fine. But I was not included this year, but that's okay. I'll be back very soon, I'm sure. In any case, I'm hoping that we have a stellar year. I mean, we're still kind of hoping for some guests. We will have Lauren Cornelius back on the program. She's actually broken into some TV, and we got a box set coming out there. We left the door open for Daisy Ashford. We're not sure we'll hear from her, but we also still have a standing invitation with Lisa Bowerman, which is running on 1.5 years now. But she's very busy. She's working hard, and we'll see what we can do there. I also will reach out to several other people. So if there's, we'll get some folks on here. It's no big deal. Otherwise, I've got plenty to talk about. The collection is going well. Things are coming in slowly. We did get a Casio watch from Doctor Who watch this Christmas from Casio. It was released in the UK, but I've managed to get one. it's kind of exciting. Big Finish is doing some great things, and there's some. I've got a Sirens of Time Gold Edition with a commemorative cassette, and that's a lot of fun. So that's my time for today. So after the quick break here, we'll get to the main story. Stay tuned.
The Vervoids are probably the best dirty joke in Doctor Who.
They're hermaphroditic plants.
A lot of plants are.
So there you go. It's based on science.
No, they'll ship anything.
There are probably 11 and handle shippers out there. You just have to drill a hole where his mouth is, and you're all set.
You know he needs the room. I've seen it in pictures.
I'm not saying you're not a fan. I'm saying you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
Doctor Who gives a drunken Doctor Who podcast for the end times.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space, in a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson,
Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse on shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to the Doctor Who Collectors podcast. Keep collecting.
Up there is the scanner, those are the doors, that is a chair with a panda on it. Sheer poetry, dear boy.
And now it's time for the main story. This is a continuation of our coverage of classic Doctor Who hardcovers that we have done over several episodes now. And we've covered 1974 through 1985 with the imprints of Universal Tandem, which happened to be Alan Wingate, Longbow, and W.H. Allen. Today we start in 1986, where the W.H. Allen imprint is used exclusively in the UK. It is a better year with 12 books being published compared to only 11 Target paperbacks and 2 companion stories, and 1 useless travel guide. Again, another brief history in case you're joining us for the very first time on this show. In 1975, Universal Tandem was sold by UPD to the British conglomerate Howard and Wyndham, and the company was renamed Tandem Publishing. And that was before being merged with the paperback imprints of Howard and Wyndham's general publishing house, W.H. Allen, to become Wyndham Publications Limited in 1976. In 1977 and 78, the Wyndham identity was completely phased out. The Tandem imprint was phased out in 1980, and all surviving titles were reprinted under the principal paperback imprint of Star Books. Target books were survived until 1993, and in the later years were exclusively used only for Doctor Who titles. The Alan Wingate imprint was retired forever at the end of 1987, and the W.H. Allen imprint is used until the hardcover run ends in June of 1988. The Target imprint was retired in 1994, but resurrected in 2011 and still used today by the BBC. Of course, anytime I talk about Doctor Who novels on this show, I am compelled by the Celestial Toymaker, the Ice Warriors, and even the Monoids to include our resident Doctor Who novelization expert, our good friend, Tony Whitt, the host of the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Welcome, my friend.
Oh, good to see you, yes. Speaking of seeing things, probably not the Monoids. It's probably those aliens that were invisible who lived on the planet.
Oh, yes, that's right.
I can't remember the names of them.
I just had to look at the list of books that were printed, and it was the most unusual select. I mean, as you looked at the titles, they were all over the place.
Yeah.
And it was a matter of, and as we go through the list, it'll become clear why. But it seemed like they were just trying to go, okay, what can we put out next? Mm-hmm. Quick, come up with a title. All right, yeah, okay, let's do that one. Because they were seriously having trouble with sales. And we'll learn more about that as we go. Of course, the publication of 16 books with one that was planned and never appeared. You'll find out about that one today, too. It's a bumper year, but the run will be coming to an end in just under 2 years' time. And so no more reprints will be done from any hardcovers, and W.H. Allen is clearly losing money on these books. These hardcovers today are extremely sought after. And you might have to steal the gold from Voga if you can get it back from Kelman. That's a tough call there. But anyway, they can be found in a couple different ways. These books can be found in what's either called ex-library edition, which is a book that is discarded, pulled, or stolen from a library of either a college or public nature, or a non-library edition, which was a retail store version or a publisher copy. No W.H. Allen titles from this year were sent to the United States since they were pulled from distribution in late 1985. As you learned in our last episode, my former company, Bundles from Britain, bought out the entire stock of everything they had in cases of hardcovers. Although a few hardcover titles did get imported specifically by some bookstores from W.H. Allen in the UK, and we'll learn about that when we get to 1988. 4 books were printed in the United States and were only known by a very small group of people. In fact, I didn't even know about them till a few years ago. So in going back to 1986, Tony, any relevant memories of that year for you that were any good?
That would have been the year after my family moved from Virginia, where we had Doctor Who, back to Michigan, where we did not. In fact, the local PBS stations in Michigan were not playing Doctor Who until, I want to say 1987.
Oh, wow.
Because I remember that was the year also that station, whatever it was, got the Hartnell package for the first time. So that was the year I saw my first Hartnell stories. And after all those years of waiting, the anticipation was so much that, the reality of the situation came in with a clash. But it happens. It happens.
Yeah, it does. But of course, as Doctor Who fans, we really did, we wanted to see those early stories. Mm-hmm. And I always reserve judgment later. Of course, I got lucky because I did see some, pirated copies of Hartnell stories prior to them being broadcast, but it was a whole different story seeing them in absolutely good clarity and figuring out how the stories go and what the history was. It was very interesting. Of course, in Doctor Who history in 1986, a few very key things that happened there. In February, the New Jersey network is the first to screen the package of the 5 surviving Patrick Troughton stories. So they were the first ones to get those. And also in February, the radio serial Slipback airs for the first time on U.S. National Public Radio.
Oh, my.
I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
So it actually did air here. I did not hear it. I didn't know about it.
I'm sure very few people heard it here.
Well, and as you know, NPR is known for its vast listener reach. So. And now on NPR, 15 minutes of silence brought to you by the Mitchell Corporation. In March, the Tom Baker movies, or the basically the omnibus episodes, commence on a number of armed forces network stations on military bases in the Pacific and Germany. So, and of course, by May of 1986, the BBC buys all the shares in Lionheart Television. So the BBC had previously only owned 2%, so they wanted a bigger stake of the company. The Western World TV and Public Media Incorporated basically was the other split. Lionheart was clearing a profit of about $1 million per year. In May of 86, setting off from Washington, D.C. with Peter Davison and Michael Grade, basically at the launch of this new enterprise for the BBC. Also in that summer, the Doctor Who USA tour begins its 2-year multi-city tour at 2 cities per week. It was hoped that all 185-plus markets where Doctor Who is screened across America would be visited, with the bold exception of Chicago. They did visit, but all we got was the bus and Bessie. No guests, no videos, no vendors, nothing. Because and by the way, I'd go more into that, but I'm going to give you a shameless plug because you can hear my story on the new Real Times Pictures by Keith Barnfather documentary on the Who USA tour coming soon to DVD and Blu-ray. There we go. I actually went down to Navy Pier to do that interview. Which is where they decided to set up shop, because there was no venue for no indoor place to screen videos, no real place for the guests to go, and they weren't allowed to have any vendors, probably because the city of Chicago wanted to be paid a special tax for that, I'm guessing.
Of course.
So there we go. I'll talk about that more in detail there. In May of '86, though advertised at the opening, the play The Inheritors of Time, which I did see, was canceled because they violated all kinds of copyright rules. So I still have my little yellow button for that, too. They gave out all these buttons with the Doctor Who logo, and I wonder if that was the problem. I don't know. In August, after 23 issues, the U.S. Marvel comic Doctor Who is canceled due to falling sales. Apparently wasn't being bought. In September, under its Playhouse video brand, CBS Fox releases Revenge of the Cybermen on VHS. I do remember that. In August to December, Ballantine Books publishes U.S. editions of 6 make-your-own-adventure books and have been published by Severn House in the UK, rebranding them as Find Your Fate books, with new covers painted by the great Gail Bennett.
Yes.
And they retail for $2.50. I know you covered, at least I know, one of those on Jason's show.
We did one and we did one for ours to fill a gap, and it filled it very entertainingly. And the artwork for the U.S. versions are beautiful.
Yeah, Gail Bennett was, I actually met Gail back in the early 80s. She did all the artwork for Fantasy Empire magazine. Mm-hmm. In fact, most of the covers is her art, and she did the Doctor and the Enterprise ones that were in the official book that Gene Airy did, not the version we reviewed.
Right.
Anyway, and later in October, on the 50th anniversary of the BBC television, BBC Enterprises takes out a 7-page ad in the publication Variety magazine, where Doctor Who gets one whole page.
Wow.
In 1986, later that year, the North American Doctor Who Appreciation Society closes its doors. And we were supposed to get TARDIS 23 in November, but was canceled due to the fact that the owner had skipped the country on a federal warrant for unpaid federal taxes.
Now that I had heard of.
Yes, so that actually happened, and there were guests confirmed for that. In fact, I bought tickets, and about a year later, I got an envelope in the mail, and it had a check for the amount I paid for the tickets. So it was obviously somebody was running the books and decided they had to refund all the money. So as far as my memories of '86, I was in high school at the time, senior year of high school, and I remember Bundles from Britain was still doing very well. We were doing lots of shows, especially Star Trek shows. That was real big back in those days, and just kind of winding up that and thinking about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. So I hadn't really gotten that far yet. Doctor Who was still being shown in Chicago. We had to wait through the entire Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee, Baker run, Davison run to get to the new stories for Colin Baker. So the good old WTTW Chicago was like, Dad, we're going to get to those, but first we're going to make you go through the entire thing again. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to go through the whole Baker run again, which was not a bad thing. I love the Baker stories. Please don't hate me out there, folks, for saying that. But it was just what I had seen the Baker run 7 times already at that point. And yeah, I still watched the show, but I was like, I want some new stuff. And getting to the books, in 1986, all of the Doctor Who hardcovers will either be W.H. Allen, Nelson Doubleday, or Amereon, and even maybe an Aeonian. We'll see. Hardcovers this year are all printed with laminated covers. The Nelson Doubleday will have a dust jacket. All Allen books will feature the Neon or Sutton logo in various colors. None of these books were available for sale in the United States at the time. So we start in January, and this is a book we're just going to showcase for the moment. No need, we've covered it on a previous episode, but this is the American version of Revenge of the Cybermen. Oh, wow. And you'll notice, the viewers of this podcast will see that, wait, that's the Pinnacle logo. It is. And of course, Pinnacle had already done its run, but it turns out the owners of this company licensed the logo for some of their books. Not all the books have this logo. This one just happens to have it. But each of these Amereon books have a different cover and a different spine and even a different size. So it was very interesting. This one happens to still be in the shrink wrap. It was published, no price is known on the book. The book was said to be limited to 80 copies, though it may be more. We don't know. This was copied straight from the UK Target paperback in a process involving photocopying and rapid page stuff. I don't know. I read it's all in red, white, and who, so you can go back there. This book has often been called the pinnacle hardcover, which has been put out there by some collectors. And unfortunately, I verified this with Kensington Books a few years ago. And if you've heard my previous episode on this, you already know. I wrote to them and I said, hey, did you guys do any cloth-bound books? And I got a very polite reply from one of their archivists that said, all of our books were paperback. We never did any hardcovers. But this is one of those anomalies. Of course, this came out during a time when we were actively Doctor Who dealers and had no idea it existed. So we don't know where these sold. But they started popping up on Amazon just about 6 or 7 years ago.
Did they ever have dust jackets, or were they always like that?
Always like this. And this one is in the shrink wrap. So this is exactly how it was. So with the title, the logo, and I've never seen the inside, so I'm a little afraid to open it. But so copies are pretty hard to find. I've only seen one for sale, and it went for about $100, but it could be more now. I don't know. You might find it in sealed condition or unsealed condition. So we're not going to review these, but 2 more of these books will come out this year, and that'll be the last time you see these books, due to the fact that the license, I guess, was revoked. So that's how that worked. Let's see. Here. All right. So next, on January 18th, we get the book The Mark of the Rani by Pip and Jane Baker, with a cover by Andrew Skilleter. Price of £6.50, which in today's money would be $22.80. 3,000 copies were printed. None were sold in the United States. No prints from this cover are available at this time from Andrew Skilleter. We're not sure why. I've reached out to Andrew, but have not heard a reply. This book is not very hard to find and can be bought for an average of about $60. This copy happens to be a non-library copy, but it has a child's name written on the inside cover. So what did the club think of Mark of the Rani?
Oh, that wasn't that long ago. That was episode 157. Dalton gave it a 2, Allison gave it a 2.25, and I gave it a 2. And it's surprising that Allison gave it a higher score than we did. Yeah. But that was mainly because of the character, the Rani. We all love the Rani. Mm-hmm. What we don't like is the Pip and Jane Baker writing style.
Okay.
Which we'll be seeing again quite soon when we start doing Trial of a Time Lord next month. So stay tuned.
This is true.
Oh, God, help us all.
So, of course, in 1987 or early 88, they do Time in the Rani in hardcover. So it does come back to haunt you.
Okay.
Unfortunately. In late January, this was an interesting thing that happened. We get The Further Adventures of Doctor Who from Nelson Doubleday, printed in the United States. And this was only available through the Nelson Doubleday Book Club. Has a hardcover with a dust jacket, includes The Deadly Assassin, The Face of Evil, and Robots of Death, all edited for American readers. 60,000 of these were printed, and a few were sold by dealers. Bundles from Britain did sell this book. I figured out a little trick from Nelson Doubleday. When you joined the club, you had to buy 6 books. It never said you couldn't buy 6 of the same book. So I tested that theory, and they sent me 6 of these beauties. So this is one of the ones I bought in 86. The other 5 we put up for sale. I think we sold them for $20 each. I was able to go back. Gene joined the club and bought 6 of the other ones. So we were sneaky, but that's how that worked. And of course, since these stories were covered in previous episodes, we're not going to have those reviewed. But as far as finding these, it came out relatively easy to find. You'll see these as low as $20. But did you ever get a copy of this one, Tony?
Yeah. In fact, I got both volumes of it. And I think one of them actually came through the Sci-Fi Book Club.
Yes, it did. But it only came through book clubs. It was never sold as a retail product outside of people like us. So, yeah, it's an interesting deal that they did. Of course, during the time when Doctor Who was very popular in the United States, Nelson Doubleday jumped right on that, got the licenses, and I did read this one, and it's quite interesting. I didn't notice a lot of changes in the style of writing from the Target book, just maybe some word changes here and there. But definitely not a bad, and a very good printing, too. The book is very solid. It's sewn in signatures, so it's a very high-quality book. A nice thing to find. Not too hard to find if you're a collector. Of course, on February 20th, we unfortunately get The King's Demons by Terence Dudley. A cover this time by David McAllister. 3,000 copies printed with a price of £6.50. The book was planned for May, but got pushed up due to a big delay with Vengeance on Varos, which actually never, ever got published in hardcover. So it got completely pushed off the shelf. This book is not hard to find, and you could find it as low as $30 with Bad King John and all. Not a favorite story of mine, and glad it was only 2 parts on the screen. So I do remember you guys talking about this one. So what did the club think?
Yes, we were not necessarily fans of Terence Dudley, though as you will see, we actually like Black Orchid a bit better than this one. And Dalton gave it a 2. This is episode 141, by the way. Dalton gave it a 2. Allison gave it a 1.5. I gave it a 2. Trey Corte gave it a 3. He was a guest on that episode, and I think he did like it more than we did, mainly because he has some specific memories attached to that one, so you should definitely listen to that episode and hear what Trey has to say. But we weren't impressed. The normal 3 of us were not impressed. The usual 3, I should say.
Oh, right. And I remember seeing this one as a camera copy that someone had copied over on PAL, and it was very difficult to see because some of the scenes were really dark. And then when I saw it for real, it didn't really improve things. No. So, unfortunately. And of course, the introduction of the cover character of Chameleon, so which they didn't know what to do with once they had him. But yeah, so there we go. The King's Demons. Again, if you really want to get this book for your collection, you'll find it cheap. You won't get gouged for it. Interesting, I want to point out, though, that on the back of the book, it says it's distributed by Lyle Stewart in the USA, but Lyle Stewart never got these. So they forgot to take those off the off the books. In March, we get The Savages by Ian Stewart Black, with another cover by David McAllister, 3,000 copies. This one gets a price increase up to £6.95, which would be $26 today. This would not be the last price increase because things were not going well. These were to basically the reason for it was to offset bad sales. The cover art was based on the 1972 photo shoot for the 3 Doctors. And I have a comparison here. I had to dig out this copy of Radio Times, and so here's Hartnell, and here he is here, and you can kind of see the exact.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, so that's where he got it from, and the TARDIS on the cover, of course, is from the 80s, and looks a lot different from the one Hartnell would have actually piloted. The painting of this cover was on display at the Doctor Who Experience in Cardiff in 2016. The cover is owned by the artist at this time. So just a note about the story. If you go back a few episodes for me to my interview with Peter Purvis, he talked about this story. He had no idea he was being let go until the final script changes were made when they were filming episode 4. Inez Lloyd came up to him, put his arm around him, and said, "I'm sorry, my boy, we're going to have to let you go. We're going to go with younger blood." And that was kind of a hint towards Michael Craze and Annika Wills coming up in the next story. Jackie Lane, of course, gets fired in the middle of War Machines. So he didn't, he basically said it was time to make way. So Michael Craze actually said after that wrap up, he had a beer with William Hartnell. And as upset as he was, he just said, Bill, as he called him affectionately, said, "I think they're gunning for you." And William Hartnell's like, "Nonsense. They'll never fire Doctor Who." Well, in the middle of season 4, yeah. They do. So that's exactly what happened. The writing was on the wall. Sadly, the story does not exist in any video format. There is an audiobook that Peter reads, and it's pretty good. The book could fetch around $50 in mint condition. This actually was a library copy, but it's extremely... the binding is really tight, and I can't show it really well, but there's an embossment on the bottom here from... It looks like a private library. So... but I won't call it's more mint than that. But anyway, this was a very early episode for you. So what did the club think of the Savages?
Yeah, not the earliest of this set of episodes, but episode 25, we read this one, and yeah, Dalton liked it okay. He gave it a 3, but Allison and I both gave it a 2 for different reasons, but neither of us were terribly impressed by it. One thing that I do remember particularly is kind of a funny moment in retrospect that at one point a character muses that it must be a Tuesday because only strange things happen on Tuesdays, and I took issue with this, and Allison couldn't understand what I was taking issue with because she hadn't understood that it was an alien character saying that this planet had
This
Tuesdays.
was a Tuesday.
And finally she figured it out, and you have one of those lovely moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my fonder memories of the podcast.
Absolutely. And I did read this book because it was missing. I wanted to find out what happened. And I don't know how true it is to the actual screen story, but the telesnaps are out there as well if you want to find those. Just not a very hard book to find in that respect. All right, moving on. This is where it gets random. So in April, we get a hardcover edition of The Giant Robot by Terrence Dix. Cover is by Jeff Cummins. 3,000 copies. The cover was actually painted in 1979 when the reprint was done. So this cover was not even a new cover. This is the old cover, except for the logo. And when... no explanation is given why it is 7 years later than the last paperback. This would be the last of the books published in hardback from the 70s. This book was pushed up to the delay of Fury from the Deep, which was pushed back in its deadline. It's not very hard to find. I've seen it for as low as $25, although DoctorWhoStore.com has a copy for $125. I think he's just left that up there. He doesn't change anything, so that's just how it goes. But this is an older one for you, too, as well. So what did you guys think of Giant Robot?
Yeah, that was episode 78, and we had Trey Corte back on the show that time. Dalton gave it a 3, Allison gave it a 2, I gave it a 3, and Trey gave it a 3.5. Basically, we really enjoyed that book. Even Allison's 2 is kind of a qualified 2. We actually did enjoy it quite a bit. It was back when Terrence Dix still kind of cared about the novelizations, and it was his own script, so of course he did. It's a great improvement on the televised story, which is not bad. It's just not the greatest Tom Baker story either.
Well, I also remember reading that they filmed most of the first part of Robot at the same time as the episode 6 of Planet of the Spiders.
Yes.
And so there was a lot of rush to scripts and stuff. I can imagine that this was kind of a chaotic period. So I understand that. Of course, I didn't get to see Robot straight away. When I saw the last Pertwee episode that they showed here, the next episode that was on the next week was Underworld.
Oh.
And I was confused out of my mind. And I'm like, okay, wait, this is not the guy I saw last week. And a week later, they showed Giant Robot. I saw the opening, and I'm like, oh, that's how it works. Okay. So then I was hooked. But Underworld made no sense to me at all. I was just completely lost. But that's how WTTW did things. So, but yeah, Giant Robot, everybody. If you need that for your collection, that's the final edition. I don't know if Virgin did one. Somebody will probably write and say, of course they. Or I don't know if they did or not. But moving on. The next book has 2 possible publication dates. 3 different people argue on when it came out. It either came out in April of '86 or August. 2 of those sources cite April, so I'm siding with them. So that is, if anyone has more information, give me a contact, DoctorWhoCollectorsPodcast@gmail.com. This is the Slipback by Eric Sayward. Cover by Paul Mark Tams. 3,000 of these were printed. Paul was commissioned to do Fury from the Deep, but his drawing was rejected. So JNT said, well, I feel bad for you. Why don't you do Slipback instead? So he did. This is the only hardcover of a novel of a story that aired on radio and not TV. And not a hard-to-find book. Be found for about $50. The ex-library copies of this particular book are not very common. I don't think this one got sent out to libraries. So anyway, I do recall that you didn't know that there was a hardcover from the Slipback until you saw my panel at Chicago TARDIS.
That's the first time I knew about that, and that was after we had recorded the episode about it, so I felt a little ashamed that I didn't have that information.
Yeah. Oh, and I was very happy to send real Target copies to your panelists for that as well. It was, I had a bunch of them here, and I thought, well, I could either try to sell them to somebody, or hey, you know what, even better.
Yes, they are still thanking you for that, Larry.
I know. Anyway, I know what the answer is, but go ahead and tell our listeners what you guys thought of Slipback.
Well, that was very recently. It was episode 165. Dalton gave it a 2.5, Allison gave it a 2.25, and I gave it a 3.5, mainly because I've always kind of liked that book, and we've said many times before that Eric Sayward tries to do Douglas Adams, even though he hated Douglas Adams. And he was always trying to ape his writing style, and Slipback, for me, is one of the few times where he actually accomplishes it. The other one, weirdly enough, is Twin Dilemma, which is also a surprisingly good novelization.
Yeah, better than the TV story, that's for sure.
So much better than the TV story. But Slipback also improves quite a bit on the radio play, which is, I have a sneaking suspicion that's why my score is higher, because neither Dalton nor Allison actually listened to the radio play, whereas I did.
Yeah, and I've heard it. I think I have it on CD somewhere in this pile here. But it's definitely, the book is definitely an improvement on that. And they did come out with paperback editions and hardcover editions for this book. Again, it's not a hard one to find if you really look, and you won't pay a fortune for it. So next, in May 22, we finally get Fury from the Deep by Victor Pemberton. Cover by David McAllister. 3,000 copies were printed, and this was about the standard until 1988 on 3,000 copies. So under the title, it reads, A Classic Adventure of the Second Doctor, now a bumper volume. That's the first time that's happened on a hardcover. And the first draft had actually a Troughton picture on the cover with a wool hat. Rejected. BBC said, no, you can't do that. So no old doctors on the cover was the rule, apparently. Of course, Patrick was still alive at the time of this book, and would have needed a royalty agreement, I guess, on top of that. This book was voted Best Target Book of 1986 by Doctor Who Magazine, issue number 133. And I think I even have, I actually have that, and we're going to look at that in just a second because it's a very interesting little article. One of the things that was different here is that on the paperback, we've got now a bumper volume with an exclamation point, Classic Adventure of the Second Doctor with an exclamation point. The paperback is missing the exclamation point.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no explanation for that. And this was, it was scheduled as a blue spine, but canceled when Virgin stopped doing Target books. The words "now a bumper volume" appear on both the imprints. And the price, because it was a bumper volume, they raised the price to £7.95, making that $30 today.
Good Lord.
So back to the Doctor Who magazine. This was 1988, by the way, February. And basically it has the Target survey results. So the 86 poll. So the runner-up of this was The King's Demons. Anyone who could take a TV script which seemed to be half finished and turn it into a compelling read such as that deserves a vote. But the winner of the 86 Target book poll with an astonishing 801 points was Victor Pemberton's amazing Fury from the Deep. What I can say, except it was an overwhelming victory, and I must say well-deserved. And I think that, although brief, Les Bailey of Wester Supermare gives it an accolade justifies, I am now convinced this was never a television serial. It all actually happened.
Oh, boy.
This article was by Gary Russell.
Of course it was. I was just about to ask you. And I could hear Gary Russell's fingerprints all over that article. So yeah.
So when I dug this out, because there was another magazine poll, and I didn't have that copy. I don't have all the Doctor Who magazines. I have a pretty good selection of them, but I happen to have number 133 in the archive, and I thought I'll just pull that out and read it. And I thought, oh, I got to read this in the podcast. That is so Gary Russell. But today, the book averages in price of about $76 for a copy in hardcover. This one happens to be a new copy, and you know, I'm sorry for that. And it does have the £7.95 on the back. So, what'd you guys think of the bumper volume?
This is a weird one. Episode 41, because Dalton gave it a 4. And Allison gave it a 2.5, but Allison said that Dalton's score was a scathing 4, and hers was a rave 2.5, because Dalton had to really went out of his way to justify his high score, whereas Allison said it's a 2.5, but I really enjoyed this, and I gave it a 3.5, so looking back, I must have liked it, which is the memory cheating. Possibly because I know that I hated the Pescatons.
Yes.
So I have a feeling it was the strength of the story that carries this along more than anything else. It possibly, I'll have to look at it again, it possibly does have amazing prose and whatever Gary and that other person were huckstering. But yeah.
Apparently. And of course the episode is, most of the story is, I believe the whole story is lost, but it has been animated. At least I think it was animated.
Yes, it's a very good animated version.
And I remember the first appearance of the sonic screwdriver, I believe, is in that story. So if my memory serves. So just a really interesting thing about Fury from the Deep. But next, this is what's interesting. This happens, of course, in the United States. Also in June of '86, we get this copy of Doctor Who and the Loch Ness Monster by Terrence Dix on the Amereon publisher label. According to Red, White, and Who, only 40 copies of this got published, making it a very rare book, if that's the case, and not much else is known about it, except for their method of photocopying the target book with the license they had and creating these books. This is still in the shrink wrap, and it's still got the barcode on it, Doctor Who Loch Ness Monster with the ISBN and all that. So, It's an interesting book. I encourage you to, basically, if you want to find the review of this one, either go back to Tony's show or my show, and you can find the review on that. So I can't even tell you what it might go for, except I saw a copy for $75 once, and I don't know if that's accurate. So I don't see them come up very often, so good luck if you want to get a complete... I have a complete set of these American books, but I got a lot of help. My special thanks to Stephen Warren Hill, who sold me most of these. He actually went out years ago when he was writing Red, White, and Who, and then bought up as many of them as he could. And I thought, well, that was smart. So absolutely. So he might have a few. If you see him, he might sell you one. So there we go. Next, in June of '86, we get Doctor Who and the Celestial Toymaker by Jerry Davis and Alison Bingman, cover by Graham Potts, and we go back to that £6.95 price. Mr. Potts, who did the artwork here, is also known for doing the cover for Doctor Who: A Celebration. His likeness of Michael Gough was so close, they had to pay Michael Gough for the artwork.
Oh, Lord.
Clara and Joey on the cover are very close to their on-screen image, and it was voted the best cover in that same issue of Doctor Who magazine number 133. Director Bill Sellers has his name misspelled in the credits. He has 2 L's in his name. They only put 1. A large version of this cover you can find in David J. Howe's book Time Frame from 1993. Of course, the Toymaker would not appear on television until Neil Patrick Harris portrays him in the 14th Doctor specials last year. Peter Purvis, in my interview with him, said that Michael Gough was the most amazing actor to work with. And at the time, I believe he was also the husband of Annika Wills. Only one episode of this story exists, however, it's been animated. And the book now is getting harder to find. Since talking about Neil Patrick Harris for a moment, that was such a popular moment that people wanted to find out about the first episode. And since it hadn't been released yet, these books got, pulled up pretty fast by people, wanted to read them. So it was kind of an interesting thing. So you can find these for about $150 in new condition. I believe this is a new copy. Yeah, it's still new. So what did you guys think of this one?
This was episode 23, and it was one of Dalton's first low scores. He gave it a 2, and it was the first time that Allison gave a book higher than Dalton did, and she gave it a 3. And that made me the outlier because I gave it a 1. I have never liked this book for various reasons, including one of them being it has 2 authors on the cover, but there's only actually one author.
Right.
Because we suspect that Allison Mingham, who was Jerry Davis's partner at the time, actually wrote the entirety of the book. And if you look at the prose, there are certain signs that show that, yes, an American author definitely wrote this book and not the original author.
And I know Jerry Davis had written many other books before, so you probably could recognize his prose if you read, since you've read so many of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Yeah, and I believe it's the only book I've seen with 2 authors on the cover, because even the War Games book just has Terrence Dix on it. No, in fact, it has Malcolm Hulke on it. Pardon me. It's just that the first 100 copies had Malcolm Hulke's bio with Terrence's picture. That one's very hard to find, I know. But now we move on to the last of the American hardcovers in June. This is Image of the Fendahl. And you can tell by the stunning artwork. Sorry for the reflection. That's how this one came out. Each book was different. This one is still in the shrink wrap, limited to 50 copies. And all I know is that it's very hard to find. And the last time it was for sale, it was selling for $165. We've already covered Image of the Fendahl in this show, so we don't need to cover it there. But this was the last book that Amereon has published, and you can find out more in Red, White, and Who, the story of Doctor Who in America by Stephen Warren Hill. And unfortunately, when I asked Steve if there was any follow-up, he said that the owner of the company had passed away. So there was nothing more to be said. But if you do go on to like a book site and search for Aeonian or Amereon, they did a lot of books, a lot of reprints, a lot of great classics, a lot of novels, and just 5 Doctor Who books. So something to have for the collection. In 9th September here, we get Black Orchid. If I didn't just turn 2 pages here, let me just double check here. Yep. Black Orchid by Terence Dudley with a cover by Tony Massaro. Voted best cover in issue 150 of Doctor Who magazine. Unfortunately, I do not have that issue. There's not much else about it. 3,000 copies were printed, as done with previous W.H. Allen books. Very hard book to track, since price-wise it went from $20 to $512. And this is an ex-library copy, because it is very difficult to find in new condition. So what did you guys think of Black Orchid?
That would have been episode 133, and Allison did not agree with the Doctor Who magazine assessment of that cover. In fact, she said she saw the cover and said no, and decided to sit that episode out. So instead, we had Jason Miller of the Doctor Who Literature podcast with us. Dalton gave it a 2.5, Jason gave it a 3.25, and I gave it a 3.5 because once you get past the 30 to 40 pages of cricket in the book, it actually turns out to be a very good adaptation of the book and expands the story, but still has some strange weirdness going on with Terence Dudley. But other than that, yeah, it was a pretty decent read.
Okay, very good. I'm going to backtrack 1 minute here because in my script I actually left out one book, and I want to go back
I wondered
to it.
about that.
Yes, Doctor Who and the Seeds of Death came out just before Black Orchid by Terrence Dix. 3,000 copies were printed, and I did not do the research, so I'm going to see if I can figure it out from here. Let's see, does not have the cover art on there, but we can certainly post that on the website later. This is, of course, 3,000 copies were printed, $6.95. I don't have any price information on it, but what do you guys think of Seeds of Death?
That would have been episode 47, and for that one we had Skip Benninghouse, who at the time was doing the Fiction Paradox podcast.
Oh, yes, very good podcast.
He gave it a 3, Dalton gave it a 3.5, Allison gave it a 2, and I gave it a 3.5. So we mostly liked that one.
Okay, and I actually liked it watching it. I thought it was a good story for Patrick. I especially love the scene where he's in the foam and the bubbles bubbling. He goes, "Oh no!" and goes down. Very comical, and some of the stories that I heard from Fraser Hines, because I was very lucky to be able to interview both Fraser and Wendy on the main stage at Chicago TARDIS. That was a really fun interview, and Wendy was extremely happy afterwards too, because I had asked questions that they had never been asked before. So that was. That was a lot of fun. So there you go. That's a nice Ice Warrior. I'm guessing this was by either Tony Massaro or by David McAllister, because Andrew Skilleter, as you notice, has disappeared from the lineup. So I wonder I don't know exactly what happened there, but it's all business, I'm sure. Next we get, in October, we get The Ark by Paul Erickson. Cover by David McAllister, 3,000 copies printed. There is a price increase to £7.25 or $27 in today's money. So imagine this little hardcover would be $27. The reference of the Doctor's picture is actually from the Celestial Toymaker. The book is not very hard to find and can be bought for about $50 or slightly more. So what did you guys think of The Ark?
That one was the earliest episode we had, episode 22, and neither Dalton nor Allison were on that one. Instead, we had Jenny Ingersoll, Jenny Fleck as she is now, but Jenny Ingersoll at the time, and Rory Jobst was also on that episode for his only appearance. Jenny gave it a 3.5, Rory gave it a 3, and I ended up giving it a 2. So I think that tells you something. The non-Doctor Who fans rather appreciated the prose and the story, and the Doctor Who fan didn't. So
yeah,
not as much anyway.
And I do remember all of this story exists. I remember, and I do remember seeing it, and it was interesting, but a little sometimes confusing. So, but that's the way that William Hartnell goes sometimes. But that's The Ark. So again, you had to pay almost $27 for this one back in the day. And I think it's worth less now. I think I said 50. So it only doubled in value in the last so many years. Wait. Next we get, in November, we get The Mind Robber by Peter Ling, on a cover by David McAllister. Distribution on the back says USA, but no hardcovers were sent here. Roughly 3,000 copies. The TARDIS on the front is drawn from the same 80s model that's been on all of these, so not a TARDIS that Patrick Troughton would have driven. And I believe his picture does not appear on the cover. Colin Young, my good friend, owns the original artwork for this book, and he actually loaned it to the Doctor Who Experience for exhibition. And book not very hard to find. You could find it for about $100. That's about where it's been going. And so, did you guys like The Mind Robber, or did you not like The Mind Robber?
It looks like we really liked The Mind Robber. That was episode 44. In fact, Stephen Fodor, who from the Too Much Scrolling podcast, was on.
Gotcha.
And he gave it the lowest score, but it was 3.7.
Wow, that's low.
Yeah. Dalton gave it a 4.25, and I gave it a 4.5, because that book is just really one of the best of this whole set of Doctor Who novels. I can't stress enough how good Peter Ling's writing was, and what a shame it is that we didn't get more stories from him, because we would have got more novels.
This is his only one.
Yep, the only one.
So That's a shame. Yeah, I don't remember reading this one, but I remember enjoying the 5-part story. Just enough. And I guess recently, if you follow Fraser Hines on social media, he actually ran into the actor who took over for him when he got sick, and hadn't seen him in many years. So it was his name was Hamish something. So
Hamish Wilson.
Yeah, Hamish Wilson, yeah. And said that they hadn't actually talked or seen each other since that time. So it was kind of a neat thing. And it was a very brilliant way they wrote that in, being the land of fiction and all that. Wendy had talked about that in the interview, saying that it was just absolutely the way to go because they didn't know how else they were going to do it. Wow. All right, so that's The Mind Robber. We're down to the last book of 1986. So in December, of course, we get The Faceless Ones by Terrence Dix and a cover by Tony Macero with a £7.25 price tag on there, 3,000 copies printed. Malcolm Hulk actually originally wanted to write this story, but he died before that could happen. David Ellis also passed away, who the original writer of the script passed away before this was done. The TARDIS on the cover is once again the same 80s TARDIS that they did for all of these. And not voted 4th out of the 11 best Target books in 1987. But it also could be 9th, because according to the article, it was listed twice. Oops. Again, this book, not very hard to find, and could be found for about $100 in new condition. So you'll notice, folks, if you've been a listener of this show, that some of the early books were going for a lot of money, and I'll close with my most outrageous offer for this episode happens to be a hardcover that sold for a crazy amount of money recently, but these are not, because these kind of had a big distribution, 3,000 copies, and nobody bought them. So a lot of them ended up, in kind of used bookstores or charity shops or whatnot, and so people are always taking pictures going, hey, look what I found at a charity shop for £1. I'm like, oh yeah, Faceless Ones. Yeah. And then a day later it's on eBay for $100. So that's how that goes. Anyway, what'd you guys think of The Faceless Ones?
That was episode 34. It was not a favorite of the panelists, but we did have Trey Corte on for that one again, and he gave it a higher score, but only by a hair higher than mine. Dalton gave it a 2, Allison gave it a 2, I gave it a 2.75, and Trey gave it a 3. And I can only imagine how much better that book would have been if Malcolm Hulk had been able to write it, because, yeah, his prose style would have definitely covered and papered over any problems that plot particularly has. Speaking of which, I have a story about Faceless Ones.
Please.
The very first time I ever read this novelization, it was a library copy, and it was a local library in Otisville, Michigan, and I happened to find it there when I was visiting my sister over the summer.
The hardcover or the paperback?
The hardcover.
Hardcover. Interesting. Okay. That explains a bit, because I know some places were able to import them from England. But Lyle Stewart did not carry this book. So interesting that the library here. And I've heard more stories about people saying their local library had a couple of these here and there, because a copy of Unearthly Child was discovered at a library sale.
Oh, wow.
And it actually, I think it resold for almost $800. Crazy. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. I remember I did enjoy the animated version of this. I got the steelbook copy. It was very cool to see what they did. I even enjoyed I don't know if you saw it, but there's a scene where they have a picture of Roger Delgado on the wall.
Yes.
I just thought, oh, I love it when they do that. And then just the next, I guess more animations will be coming forward, but we don't know what they're going to be yet. Well, of course, that concludes 86, but sales continued to decline for these books due to the fact that they were very expensive off the shelf. $27 today is quite a bit for a little book. Some collectors continued to buy them, but not enough to turn around the deficit at Tandem. Target book sales are also starting to decline this year. So the U.S. market was picking up, but they stopped Target book distribution on a wide scale. Only certain titles got sent over here. And those famous gift sets that were done to alleviate overstock also never got sent over here. If some of those had, that might have been a different story. Of course, the hardcovers of Doctor Who will end in the middle of 1988. That takes care of that. If you want to own a set of these, it's not impossible. I do have a set. Some are library, some are mint. But after doing an average of costs, it might cost only about $1,086 for all the books, including the American editions and the Nelson Doubleday. So it's a little bit cheaper from last year, but even though this is more books. So my advice, of course, to all collectors out there, make sure you're getting a good deal. Negotiate when possible. Beware of high-priced auctions. I will talk about that in just a moment. You can also find some titles at Abe's Used Books or Books A Million. You might get lucky on eBay, but be careful of high buy-it-now prices. The Target Book Group on Facebook is a great place to shop because they're all trusted sellers there. Especially folks like Dale Santos, Jonathan Ruffle, Luke Ashby, and David Russell, all people I will vouch for on my life. You can also find some new copies at DoctorWhoStore.com, and sometimes you can find them at Who North America in Canby, Indiana. Now, I was talking earlier about a book that got a ridiculous amount. This auction closed on Sunday. It was a non-library copy of The Claws of Axos from 1976 with a dust jacket. And the sold price was £2,555.
Oh my God.
Which puts it close to $3,000 US. And I believe, I know also, just on the fair point, it was sold by a charity auction person, and I believe the information I got was that a Doctor Who collector who had passed away left his collection, and they were donated to this charity, and they decided to sell off the collection. A copy of Loch Ness Monster first edition sold for £685, but this one went over £2,500, which of course there's been some discussion in the Braxiatel collection on Facebook about, well, I've got one, does that mean it's worth $2,500? Maybe. I've got a copy. It's a nice ex-library copy. Maybe, I don't know what I'm not selling it, but I don't know if that makes it worth that. I don't know how badly that person really wanted that book, but I'm just thinking that's two of my mortgage payments.
True.
To buy that book, and I thought, wow, that is quite of an investment. I'll talk more about that in our next segment after this. But there you go. So my special thanks, of course, to Tony Whitt, host and producer of the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, available on SoundCloud and many other providers. So what's coming up for you guys?
We are about to release my interview with Fraser Hines, which I also did at Chicago TARDIS. That's going to be this weekend, and then right after that, a week after that, will be our discussion of his novelization of Evil of the Daleks, because we kind of needed a break from Colin Baker, believe it or not. But we're about to go back into the trial, so we've only got 4 more books with him, so yeah.
But I'm looking forward to hearing that interview myself. And as far as for us here, a future episode will continue the classic hardcovers with Tony Whitt when we look at the hardcovers of 1987. But we can't do that until he reaches the first Sylvester McCoy story, which will be a little while yet.
Yes.
None of those books were in the U.S. distribution either. So if you'd like to see full color covers of these books, you can follow us on Instagram at Doctor Who Collectors to see the full cover artwork. You can watch this episode on Patreon with a $15 subscription, and I want to thank all of our Patreon subscribers out there for keeping this podcast on the air. And if you have any photos or proof of life of books that I have not talked about and do exist, please give us an email at drwhocollectorspodcast@gmail.com. Put hardcover photos in the subject line so I actually read it. And that would be great. Once again, thank you, my friend, for being here, Tony. I really appreciate your collaboration here.
All right, and thank you for having me.
Thanks again, and stay tuned, my listeners, for the most outrageous offer.
We are going on a journey, a very long journey, through the world of the Target novelizations in publication order. Every week, we are looking at a new book, talking about Terrence Dix, Malcolm Hulke, and all our Doctor Who novelization friends. Whatever you do, keep turning the pages. This is Jason Miller of the Doctor Who Literature Podcast, a member of the Direction Point Podcast Network, and you are listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Keep collecting.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitzsafried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast on the Direction Point Podcast Network. Keep collecting.
All my travellings throughout the universe, I have battled against evil, against power-mad conspirators. I should have stayed here. The oldest civilization. Decadent, degenerate, and rotten to the core. Power-mad conspirators, Daleks, Sontarans, Cybermen. They're still in the nursery compared to us. 10 million years of absolute power. That's what it takes to be really corrupt.
And now it's time for the most outrageous offer. The most outrageous offer is a Doctor Who or Doctor Who related item that appears to be priced way beyond where we believe it should be. And I'm going to throw out a little controversy here because my item today was something that I found as I was in the process of bidding on certain things here and there, and I noticed this. I put a bid in pretty early on this item and had no idea it was going to reach the price level it did. But what I'm talking about here is a non-library copy of Doctor Who and the Claws of Axos in pretty good shape. It was a slight tear in the dust jacket, but from a book from 1976, not too bad. But anyway, it's sold for £2,177. I did not do the connection to dollars, but probably close to $2,300. That's a little crazy. It appears to have gone overseas because they charged him £132 in shipping. So now, firstly, I want to point out that it was sold by a charity. It appears a Doctor Who collector had passed away and willed his collection to a auction house. So the money was raised for charity. But still, that seems a bit pricey. It's close to the level of the Planet of the Daleks one we did a few back, and I don't remember the price, but it was crazy. But this kind of begs the question now. Now, I put this into the website, and I now calculate the ex-library copy based on this to be worth about £1,000, and that doesn't make any sense. It shouldn't be that much, and this book should not have reached that level, but it did. And so, unfortunately, I don't think the person who bought it is ever going to get that back. I don't think that's going to happen twice, but it's just something that happens out there. You know, it used to bother me, and now I'm like, oh well, hey. People had said they got in on the bid, but then got out as soon as it got over £1,000. But I didn't think it would go to £2,000. For me, this is like 2 mortgage payments. That's just absolutely beyond what I think is reasonable, and I do think it's an outrageous price. So I did post it in the Braxia Tale collection on Facebook, and there was a little debate back and forth, but not much, because people were wondering then, what are their copies worth? And somebody even had the bold thing to say, well, just because it's sold for that doesn't mean it's worth it. And I'm like, I have to say, well, it kind of is, because we're not talking about a starting auction price here. We're talking about a closed sale. And I get people all the time that say, hey, look what this is worth. And they show me an eBay page where there are no bids. And I said, well, that's not what it's worth. No one's bought it yet. And they'll argue with me and say, well, but that's the price. I said, no, that's a starting price. If it doesn't sell, I bet he relists it for slightly less. So that's, I'm talking about a confirmed closed. And I'll have the picture up on the website. I took a screenshot of the closed sale, and I still have it in my feed. So it's definitely there. While I'm scrolling around here. I'm going to pull it up while I'm talking, but it's just a absolutely crazy price. So let me see if it's still here. Yeah, here it is. And it does not give me the price in dollars, so it's still the same, $21.77. But that's just crazy. It's sold on January 12th at 2:00 in the afternoon. So that is it. So these early hardcovers, if you have one in non-library condition, and I have a few of those, but I don't know if it's going to go for $2,400 or $2,200 or 2,100 pounds. Well, if you got the money and you're serious about spending that kind of money, all power to you, because I've got a lot of stuff in my collection. I'd be more than happy to sell you. So there you go. That's the most outrageous offer, and that wraps it up for the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast. Thank you for listening. I want to thank my guest today, Mr. Tony Whitt, for helping me out with these classic hardcovers of 1986. And stay tuned for what's coming next. I really don't have anything on the schedule right now, but I guess you'll be as surprised as I am. So thanks again for listening to this show. Tell your friends, and keep collecting.
A Doctor Who Podcast Network.